Hi, Sasha. I'm so happy to welcome you back for the second episode of Conscious Conversation.
It's very sweet of you. You're very kind.
And this time I promised to bring a friend with me, so I would love to introduce her. Hi, Diana.
Hi, Val.
Hi, Diana.
Last episode, we touched on so many interesting subjects, and we talked mainly about the what and the why of the current situation, but we didn't exactly dive deep into them. But we did collect a rather large list of references that I would actually like to add to the text in the description to kind of promote the personal research from people in our audience. We didn't talk much about the how. So what I would like to do today is invite us all to discuss further the how and to share our know-how in terms of how can we collectively stop imagining the apocalypse and start imagining the revolution.
The answer is to stop. You either do it or you don't do it. If you want to stop envisioning the apocalypse, you simply stop it. It's always a process of consciousness, and we either entangle ourselves with the dream spell or we do not. And again, the mechanics of breaking the dream spell is connected only to your own flame of sovereignty. And that sovereignty is sustained by two simple factors, two simple elements, one of which is pure truth, which is not the truth that your brain tells you, but it's the truth that self exists. And the other factor is right action and the degree to which you are able to continue with right action no matter what the circumstance. So I would say it really comes down to pure truth, and right action in the now is what ignites the flame of sovereignty. The flame of sovereignty is where your consciousness actualizes, and in that state of actualized consciousness, you can define and divine right from wrong, and you're able to then disidentify with false light, with idolatry, with the false narrative that's coming at you from the radio or from the television or from the billboard or from the Hollywood machine or from the academic machine. So, of course, one also needs to understand that we are all of us born into a world which is so incredibly weaponized at every level of education and of learning and of society and of the political ecology and the social ecology. It's all weaponized. Everything is designed to make you a fool or a joker if you step outside of the status quo. But that's a great old Babylonian trick of trying to keep voices of dissent out of the mainframe. Unfortunately for the Babylonian priesthood and for the invisible masters that have been conducting this orchestra for an awful long time, that is all changing. Let me quickly caveat by saying that Babylonian masters, the invisible masters, the them out there, I'll repeat, is only the representation of the unresolved aspects of you and I. So there is no them and us. The New World Order, the CIA saboteurs, the Jesuits, the Vatican complex, the internationalist bankers, all of these creatures have managed to manifest on our collective radar screen because we have variously permissioned them to manifest in our lives at this time. They are our servants. They are the ones who are the archetypes, the icons that are emerging in the field in order to reflect back to us the extent of our unconsciousness as a civilization. So we have surrendered our true divinity. We've surrendered our true spark of the I am. And that is why we are living in a world and at a time where we have lawyers telling us what is lawful and unlawful, even although we are all born with an innate understanding of natural law and natural justice. We know. That's why we have a conscience, for God's sake. But lawyers have become a huge industry and judges, the judiciary, that define whether or not we go to prison or not. Doctors define whether or not we get well or not. And so they've become the intercessionary between ourselves and our health. Bankers have become the intercessionary between us and our own capacity to generate wealth and prosperity. Governments have become the intercessionary between how we conduct our lives and our social ecology. And so it goes on. And of course, most of all, the priests and the churches have become the intercessionaries between us and our divinity. So the point is that we're just now waking up, finally, from a very long civilizational sleep cycle where we have permissioned in the field intercessionaries to intervene, to act as the brokers, the go-between, the agents between us and God, us and wealth, us and health, us and education, and so on and so on. This is a moment to rejoice when we see the social construct and the social contract collapsing in the way that it is right now. This is absolutely a moment of jubilation for us. We should all be exhilarated. But let me say that I'm speaking literally. I'm getting about 3,000 to 3,500 emails and SMSs a day. I am constantly now being able to read the kind of barometric pressure of the planetary conversations that are going on, from a high level with government and intelligence to the street level and the more mundane level. And I'm seeing across the board this the cracks and the fissures, the earthquake, the seismic rumbles, the pendulous skylines. It's all perfect apocalypse imagery. And we are the ones conducting that beautiful, majestic, terrifying orchestra. Now, if we truly want to look at the solution, as you began with the question, then all we simply need to do is disidentify from that apocalyptic envisioning, imagineering, and imagine the other, envision the other. This is the time for that, because we're moving into timelessness in that sense. The whole tick-tock complex of our matrix is coming to an end. We're no longer going to be governed by false 1260 Babylonian Gregorian calendar systems and false time signatures. We're not going to be governed by Cronus, by the crown that of empire, of imperial corporate hegemony. Yes, we're living through the end of that, and it's terrifying. And yes, the metadata surveillance and the 5G weaponized air and the rollout of New World Order and midnight magistrates dreaming up these insane rules saying that if you're walking on the streets after curfew, you go to prison for 10 years. That's in Australia now. Can you believe it? It's all just icons and totems manifesting on that screen of the apocalyptic death. It's a death rattle. That's all it is.
So just to clarify, you're saying, and I do deeply believe in this, that in order to be kind of flung into fear, you only need to permit it. The first kind of tipping point is when all of that is coming into you, to identify that it is not of you, right? And to recognize it as something external, something that is nothing to do with your internal world. You did not give birth to this fear out of your, divine nature. You are not finding yourself caught up in all of these games of this external circumstance by nature. You have been kind of forced into it, but in it you find yourself purely because you didn't resist.
Well, being forced into it, I disagree with that. We are the ones who herd ourselves into these spaces. We are the ones who lead ourselves as the Pied Piper. It is our own hubris, again, the unresolved aspects of who we are that lead us into these spaces. And we do that in order to feel fear, because fear becomes a servant. It becomes a good taskmaster and a servant at the same time. The fear is not fun. We don't enjoy that space, but it is in the compression of that fear space that we begin to identify, indeed, what you say, that it is not of our true essence. It is an egregore. It is an elemental cloud that moves through this 3D universe. It's a texture. It is a harmonic, a field of the spectrum of reality that we can choose to embrace and to feel and to be terrorized by, or not, or not. You learn that only when you've truly been in a space of abject fear. And there is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And many of us have been in situations in our life of abject fear, which is where, that is the space, the cauldron, wherein we learnt fearlessness. So it is a dialectic, it's a binary universe, it's part of the polarity and the duality of this rather beautiful, stupid 3D hologram that we all soul migrated to play and to define our true
that we also
essence.
love. Yeah,
yes,
that we also
indeed.
love. Can I ask Diana, can I ask you, you work a lot with trauma release, and fear becomes, you know, an important component in that vibrational kind of formula that you administer to the people that you work with. Would you have something to add in terms of, you know, this fear transformation kind of walkthrough?
Absolutely. What's happening at the moment is that a lot of really deep trauma is coming up to the surface to be recognized. And so that's being apparently triggered by our external circumstances, which are right in our face. You know, the beast has kind of approached and it's now right in front of us. Some of us saw him coming, some of us didn't, but here he is. And so what this is doing is bringing up layers of trauma from all of that historical period that you described, Sacha, which has been with us for so long and which has basically created kind of multiple layers of trauma building themselves up on you know, one on top of each other, showing us that our foundations are very, very weak in the sense that they are built on these fear constructs and control constructs which are deep in our psyche. And that's absolutely collective. There's no one who's free of that. And the opportunity now is to literally kind of embrace the coming up of the layers and to do the work to really transform the trauma and the fear. And so anybody who's spiritually bypassing and who is looking towards the false light constructs, who's looking towards other kinds of intermediaries and saviors, whether that's in the spirit world or that's in the human world, will find themselves deeply disempowered, because we need to get back into our bodies and back into the root of who we are. And therefore we need to actually face the very monster lurking within. And so dealing with trauma is not a pretty process. It's hard to package up and sell it and put a nice ribbon on it. It's not a spiritual fix. It's a powerful process. As Sacha said, you know, when you're in the crucible of your own fear, that's where you learn fearlessness, but you have to walk through the fear. You have to walk through the grief. You have to walk through the guilt. You have to walk through the shame. You have to walk through the terror. And in my personal journey, there have been so many layers from so many historical periods in what we call time that have just come up again and again and again to be faced. And really the essence of that is to forge our sense of unity between the light and the dark so that we can embrace it all. We must embrace the overlord and the oppressor within us, just as we must embrace the victim and the one who's been duped and tricked. We must embrace all of these facets and make them one, so that we can then move beyond this this kind of role that we see ourselves in, which is the helpless sheep herded by the overlords into this situation. Understand that we are the overlords just as much as we're the sheep, and really move into that space where we accept and embrace all of our humanity and all of that vibrational construct of our humanity that we've lived, and then turn it into something else. I believe this is about now a new layer and level of reality, which has absolutely brought together all the aspects of ourselves, understood them, accept them, released what no longer works, and then helping us to restore ourselves to source. That's what we need to do. We need to come now back to this very beautiful source connection, which happens at a cosmic level, at a very deep earth level as well, and is then a kind of new stream of power and information moving through our bodies, which really enables us to become so powerful that this death rattle of 5G and electromagnetic control will just no longer have any influence. It will just become obsolete. It will no longer have power over us. So that's more or less how I see the process right now, and it's quite epic.
Entirely right. I think that was very well stated. I love the fact you talk about embodiment and being back in the body. Remember, the prime virtue of who and what we are is that we are ensouled beings. We are, soul in flesh, and we are incredibly special in that sense. We're also the catalyst between the dielectric universe, the hyperdimensional field of reality, and the paramagnetic earth, and all the subdimensional fields, or the telluric realms, the elemental realms. The human technology, the human being, is the living kiss point between the dielectric and the paramagnetic. We are everything. In that sense, we're born with the virtue of being the alpha and the omega incarnate. And this is a very, very high-born situation for each of us at every level. And it is why, if we want to discuss the cosmogenesis of the hybridization of the human gene, the human genome, we are also the embodiment, the manifestation of all of these galactic intelligences made flesh as well. So the key bit being that we are ensouled. We are incredibly majestic when we have stepped into this actualized state and this cognition, this recognition of the alpha and the omega that is the Homo sapiens sapien.
Walking towards this consciously embodied state where we are absolutely electromagnetically connected, as we should be, with all the cosmic force that's meant to flow through us and all that earth energy, that deep earth energy. And when we can really do that, we will experience incredible power, incredible longevity, incredible conscious awareness. We will, through our very flesh and bones, become something that we would even call a god, from our limited perspective. And this is what we've lived. We've lived this as humanity. We're going to live it again. We're in that kind of beautiful crossover point where we're starting to wake up to it again and its possibility after so many eons of subversion and submerging of our core identity. And this is just so magnificent. And this is what drives my work as well every day, is the restoration of this incredible state that we know and we remember on a cellular level because we have lived it.
There has never really been an opportunity for us to collectively go through this experience. I mean, this whole lockdown is becoming a trigger for personal unresolved trauma in each single one of us. So whether it is the actual virus that you're afraid of, or whether it is the fear that is within you that you're afraid of, you have to become committed to the resolution. And we do that collectively only because of what lies ahead. What is it that we're so passionately fighting for? What are we going to find on the other side?
The imperative that is driving humanity at the most primal level, the imperative is our divinity. Is the fact that we recognize, as Diana said earlier, we recognize this within ourselves at the cellular level. I would say it's at the hyperdimensional level of the cell. It's way beyond the cellular intelligence. It's at the quintessential Atman, the sentient spark of who we are, who we be, each one of us as unified, divided, and yet unified aspects of the Godhead. What is driving us, the imperative, is our divinity, is the fact that we recognize that this temporal battleground that we are enjoined upon right now is it is the indivisible line between the void and creation, between matter and antimatter, between the ensouled and the soulless. We are the emissaries, the sons and daughters of God Most High in that context. And the recognition of that becomes paramount, because the imperative that drives each of us, whether we have exceeded the fact, evolved to the realization or not, is that we are the embodiment of the absolution, of the redemption. and of the salvation, not just of self, but of all realms of expression in this temporal universe. So when you take that galactic view of the responsibility at the soul covenant level that each of us elected before we transmigrated into this bizarre, dualistic, universal witchery, fuckery, however you want to put it. Either way, we transmigrated here, each of us, because we are all the alchemist. We are all the Christ. We are all the Bodhisattva. That is the imperative that drives every single one of us. We are manifesting soul out of antimatter, because as we anchor the divine codes, the patterns of perfection to this temporal earth plane in the coming ages, I don't like to use the word time, because actually we're moving beyond time. But as we do anchor those patterns of perfection, of the vibral nature of our immortal paradigm, then we become the turning point for all sorts of lower elementals that have not yet met with light, and some of which are returning to light. We become the absolution point for that majestic orchestra. And that is the imperative that drives us, whether we know it or not. We are each of us the Christ in that sense. And the awakening to that realization is where we align with the divine spark and have unlimited, unfettered energy flowing through us, life force and capacitance to change, to manifest outcomes. And as Diana also alluded a little earlier, we have indeed already entered the immortal paradigm. We have already moved beyond time. We are only living, as I've said, for some short years. We are living through the shadow of time still, to many of us who are not fully resolved within our own soul evolution. We are still believing in the iconography, and we are idolaters and still believing in the mythos, which is why we've become dream-spelled and spellbound variously. But those who have not, or who have disentangled from the dream spell, are fully aware of the divine nature of the task that each of us have to fulfill in this world. Very good. I like your allusion to the AI and the 5G in this context, because I think that's entirely correct. But I would suggest that, again, the 5G and the AI are our servants, not the other way around. All of the tyranny and the petty bureaucracy that we've seen unfurl since the Second World War and slowly strangulate our humanity from us with rogue executives and judicial systems and military intelligence apparatus and metadata surveillance and police brutality and engineered wars, disease and poverty, and all of this stuff, which has indeed amalgamated in the 21st century into a Borg-type complex, a terrifying specter of artificial intelligence and algorithms which are doing the data mining and then making the determinations about who lives and who dies. Basically, it comes down to that. It's more aberrant than any science fiction scriptwriter could have come up with, and actually it's already upon us. Here it is. I believe that this rollout right now of this semi-orchestrated pandemonium connected to the corona pantomime is as a result of a global technocracy which was so interlocked into protocols and old manual books that had already been set, so that when the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control took their red alert status from the Pirbright Institute and the Kinetic Group and these other Sabbatean Luciferian militarized agendas. Once that happened and the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization issued their red alert, you've got 200 health ministries around the world who, by the United Nations treaty that they enjoined, are forced into compliance with the red alert status. And then they necessarily have a protocol that activates in every single hospital and clinic and doctor's waiting room. And so you've got this orchestrated pandemonium. But I did say semi-orchestrated because it's actually artificial intelligence algorithms that are almost certainly driving the closing down of the global economy, the collapsing of businesses, the enforcement of these aberrant, stupid rules and regulations. all of which had been planned and prepared by the Sabbatean bureaucratic pen over decades. And here we are living through the collapse of that nonsense. It's a calamity. And what it's done in service to us and our humanity, it has collapsed our false light economy in front of us. All of our businesses, small and large, airlines are going insolvent. Countries are going insolvent. The parent corporation itself is going to feel the effects of this. If you look at what's happened with the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury Department in the last 5 days, it is blissful stuff. But the point is that artificial intelligence and the 5G weaponized air that is acting as the carrier for artificial intelligence and for these monstrous rollout is our servant, is acting as the manifestation of our unresolved, subliminal, collective unconscious, which is come on cue to say to us, nope, you've taken a left fork in the road, you want to be on that road over there. Now, give it 3 weeks, maybe 3 years, and we're going to be moving through the gates of Halcyon yet again, as you quite rightly suggested earlier, Diana. The ancient civilization of Mu reemerges. And we're about to move into a golden dawn of unimagined, unheralded consequence and beauty. Those of us who maintained that vision quest in truth and in honor, for some of us for decades, some of us for a short period of time, well, we know the truth of this, because the only thing that you can know in a world of calamity and pandemonium is to know what you know. All of these behemoths that are emerging in this apocalyptic shroud are our servants. Yeah. They are our servants. They are unresolved aspects of the Gestalt. I welcome them. I made the film 5G Apocalypse, the Extinction Event, a year ago, which was absolutely prescient. It's wonderful to be in a position to say, I told you so to 7 billion people. But the point being, it's going to mutate us into an alien species? No. Doing quite the opposite. It is now acting as the trigger and the catalyst for a complete reformation in the Gestalt, which will see a restitution of the true dignity of the common pulse of humanity. And I welcome this day. I welcome it.
Absolutely. It's so true. And what it reminds me of is, you know, it's the hand that when it just grasps too tightly, the object in the hand just slips away. And that's exactly what 5G is. You know, it's that illusion that the system itself has of itself, that it can grip us so tightly that it will crush us. And we're not. We're just oozing out of the fingers right now. We're just, you know, we're slipping away, and we're all awakening to what is going on. Everybody in their own way, and that is so beautiful.
It is. And remembering at all times, I've been getting behind in the last few months this 5G BioShield technology, which we've run through 4 independent clinical trials in 4 countries in Europe, and with enormous success, 100% success rate so far. And so we know that we have technology right here, right now, that can shield us from the mutancy of harmful radiation, ionized, non-ionized radiations. That's not the issue. We've got the technology, and we can get that out. We're doing our bit with the technology that we've got to get it out as quickly as possible and as widely as possible. But actually, there's an even greater truth to that, which is that when we have rejoined and reconfigured with the Atman, with the psionic center of who we truly are, then we are naturally emanating a whole new codex of frequency, which absolutely annihilates any possibility of intrusion against the gene expression. Absolutely 1000%. But that is also connected to threshold events. So we do, in a sense, need to go through this calamity. A lot of people are getting dizzy and getting sick and tasting metal in their mouths. And as this 5G horror story rolls out, undercover in some cases of this corona outbreak, it has been a cover for some of the more Sabbatean elements of the New World Order to roll out the 5G infrastructures. We're seeing the evidence of that. We're seeing the birds drop out the sky. We're seeing trees being stripped within days and weeks of their leaves and their bark once these masts go live. We're seeing people get sick and bleeding out of the nose and the ears and becoming incredibly ill. Autoimmune systems are under systemic endemic attack by this invisible threat. And when it all comes to light in the coming weeks, months, and years, it will be the absolute factor that brings about the destruction of government. All government. All government is evil at its core. All of it is predicated on usury, on the harvest of humanity, and on conducting dream spell, which is monstrous deception and monstrous treason against the true sovereign. The true sovereign is always the living men and women and creatures of the living soil. So this horror story we're living through right now will not be a long one, but it will give us all that we need to allow the scales to fall from the eyes, pick up the stick, recognize the spiritual integrity of who we are, whilst at the same time, we, each of us, begin the process, the needful process of dismantling that creature called government. All aspects of government are rogue and are mutant and do not serve living souls. That, in any golden era or on any plane of existence in this multiverse, is a known universal law. You do not require money and money exchange, okay, in any enlightened state. And you certainly don't need a government telling you who you are, what to do and what to be, ever.
Beautiful. So what's fascinating me at the moment is that obviously we're now in a process. We've talked about 5G, and we've talked about what it's doing to people now, particularly people who don't have spiritual resilience and who don't have technologies to assist them. We're talking about this future world where our energetic construct will be absolutely resistant to 5G. 5G will have absolutely no power over our beautiful sovereign genetic energetic construct. And however, we have a transition phase that we're going through now. And so we need to think about the how, literally within our human bodies, how are we going to make this transition from where we are now collectively to where we will be? And how can we navigate that? And what tools can we use? And what can we bring forth from within ourselves as more and more of the human population is exposed to 5G as it's rolled out? As more and more of us awaken, as more and more of us plug in, what are these processes that we're going to be seeing within ourselves? I'd love to have your take on this.
It's what I've been saying for over a decade and what I've been screaming since 2013. And it won't change until this occurs, which is stop paying taxes. There is no government or 5G or 4G or mutant health industry or agrochemical industry or pharmaceutical industry or global banking cartels without taxes. If you choose to render coin unto Caesar, then you will live by Caesar's dictate. We have done this now for 2,000 years at the very least. It is time for us to awaken to that simple mechanical function and fact. We are the ones paying the creature that is killing us. And when we truly actualize and move our actualized spiritual awakening into dynamic consciousness in action, we then recognize that when I pay gold unto Caesar, when I pay taxes and fill out those godless forms, I am the one fashioning bullets that will enter the heart of children in Yemen or South Sudan. I am the one paying for thermonuclear missiles. I am the one paying for a $250 military hardware machine that is terrorizing this planet back into the Stone Age. But until I have moved my spiritual awakened state into dynamic consciousness in action, I will always be spinning wheels and asking the same question: what to do? How can we change? You see, it comes back to that simple thing, because paying personal income tax is you complying, is you giving your consent to the fiction. It is as simple as that. When you've got 5 billion or 4 billion souls in the developed world who are paying a coin to Caesar, that's what you get. The entire Vatican complex, the global hybrid of parent corporation and 200 nation states and the central banks, reserve banks, and the institutions that have proliferated are all based on personal income tax fleeced from the common citizenry. And in point of fact, we would need to then look at the word citizen and the whole construct of citizenship. We do not wish to be citizens on a ship that is cast adrift and controlled by invisible masters. What we want to do is return to our immortal, immanent, ineffable majesty as living men and women of the living soil, in alignment with the divine principles, in right conduct, standing in honor, making love, being blissful, being creative, expansive, and affirmative at all times. That's it. I mean, that's what we were born to be and born to do. But part of this bad dream that we're awakening from is the apocalypse, which will be the very thing that propels us back into that realization. So again, all geometry is perfect. The now is always perfect. And bearing perennial witness in the state of sovereignty individually is the critical factor. Again, pay your merchant taxes, pay business taxes, absolutely, if you want to keep streets and lampposts. I don't, but if you do, pay them. And that's right and proper, that's right action. But it's the personal income tax issue I'm talking about. When your own time and motion is infringed upon by the state or by the crown, and you are paying into that fraud, then you are the one responsible for what it does to you when it raises a 5G mast. Should people be out on the streets tearing down the mast? Of course they should be. That's also called dynamic consciousness in action. What do you do when a drunken moron with an axe turns up at your front door at 2 o'clock in the morning and you've got sleeping family? You shoot him in the face if you need to. Yes, entirely appropriate. Anyone who's too spiritualized and believes that all acts are violent, please step down off that horse very quickly, because you're about to meet the battle axe. He's coming to knock on your door. And this is part of what each of us have to recognize. We should, of course, be self-organized. Filling out petitions on the government website is not going to change anything. Governments have factored this in. Institutions are dead fictions. They've all factored this in. Engineered consensus, manufactured consent. Democracy itself is the most mutant, godless program software ever installed in humanity. All it does is ensures that the most stupefied element of society becomes the creature that devours the enlightened half or the enlightened 10%. No, step away from all of these mutant programs. And government is the thing conducting the orchestra. Your money is the thing that pays the government to conduct the orchestra. Withdraw your consent by dynamic consciousness in action.
So do you think do you think we need to self-organize and collectively kind of do that in one day? Because a lot of people are asking in terms of how. They understand the what and the why, but then they start to ask, like, okay, when people are being put into a position where it's very hard to get out of that contract with taxes, and they need to understand which are okay and which are not okay, and the cause and effect, you know, like you just described. And then what happens? Do we collectively just pick a day, count down to it, and just stop? Like how?
No. It's not going to happen that way. It's not going to happen that way. I mean, in some sense, yes, that's going to assist the wave of transformation when small collectives start grouping together. Look, if you wanted to do it like a Tupperware party, it's not a bad idea, and sit down with your friends and family and all agree that on the first day of next month, you're all going to just withdraw paying taxes, and then ask each of them to go and speak to 5 friends.
Tupperware party organizing is not going to be the direct solution. But the direct solution is, again, do confirm to me, is it rising, let's say, changing that internal frequency to a point where we are no longer a match to the tax system in general? You know, in the same way that's 5G, just kind of go beyond that limitation, and then we will not be susceptible to its power.
It could be that this entire conversation is moot, because it is also my contention right now that there is such a rejigging taking place in the basement of the global economy that in the next 45 days, we're not going to be seeing governments overreach in the way that they have. I am absolutely certain that there is a takedown of the cabal, that there's a takedown of the globalist machinery, and I believe that there will be universal tax credits and redemption going on. Absolution of debt and a jubilee is almost certainly on the horizon. Whether it's in 3 weeks or 3 years, I don't know, but it's certainly within that time. I would suggest it's within months and not years. We're going to see absolution of the entire planetary economic pyramid system. And I think that at that point, this conversation is largely moot. People won't be needing to reorganize themselves in small clusters of intellectual terrorist cells operating between Johannesburg and San Diego. We're going to see the machinery itself collapsing, and the reemergence will occur. There are a lot of good people in the economic sector, in government, in the United Nations even, who have good ideas that can be brought forward. But at the end of the day, I would still refuse to pay any personal income tax. I'm not interested in a social contract. I wasn't asked when I was born, do I agree to this contract? I'm not interested, thank you very much. I don't want tarmac on roads. I don't want street lamps. I genuinely don't. I live in the jungle here. We have a beautiful place, but we have technologies, advanced technologies that will be powering up our world with no destruction of the earth taking place. We have all of this stuff already, and that's also about to be released without any question of doubt. I've been in that game for an awful long time, been trying very hard to help with the process of incubating breakthrough innovation and technology to market. It's been very, very difficult in the last 10, 15 years, but I believe all of that is also undergoing enormous paradigmatic shift right now. I genuinely believe in a year from now, we'll be having a very different conversation. And it will be more about the mechanics of ascension, the mechanics of reconfiguring the immortal gene, and embracing the hyperdimensional aspect of our world and our reality. We won't be having discussions about should we be mobilizing one another to go and march on the courtroom or march on the local council office. These troglodytes and Mandarin class are pretty much over. It's their death rattle that we're listening to if we truly train our ears.
Biggest motivation for us to go and reach that point, reach that peak, is our own divinity's desire to meet itself. Like, for me, that is just enough, to commit, to take responsibility for that personal process.
It's really in my view, the cornerstone to the revelation that is upon us. And that is the process that is underway of retrieving human trafficking. Thousands, tens of thousands, quite possibly hundreds of thousands, and it may even be millions of people who have been trafficked. Children, and in the main, it is mainly children. But that process of redemption is symbolized mostly, in my view, by what is happening right now with the retrieval of limitless souls who have been incarcerated, bred for purpose, been raped, mutilated, sacrificed generationally. There is an enormous pan-global operation underway this week that kicked off, which is retrieving those souls. If people want to know why there are tanks on the streets of Los Angeles and Chicago and New York, it is because there are deep underground military bases that are being taken down. I've had this corroborated now by multiple first-hand reports to me personally by people in the military complex, in the United States intelligence and army, and a number of people around the world who are connected to those communities, who are part of the process of retrieval and of rehabilitation. So this is absolutely happening. I put this out on my Facebook yesterday because I was 100% satisfied in my own mind through independent sources coming directly to us that this is underway. And I think that it's profoundly symbolic. I mean, I launched with the International Tribunal of Natural Justice the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse 2 years ago in Westminster in London. I have spent hundreds of hours counseling survivors and victims. I spent hundreds of hours also with the court in sessions taking expert testimony and witness testimony from survivors and from investigators and from government officials and from powerful people who themselves know the truth of this. So this is a revelation. The fact that these babies are being brought, some of them have never seen daylight. They are being retrieved from underground systems. You cannot begin to imagine the truth of this. But I just suggest that if we want the scale to fall from our eyes, if we want to even talk in terms of spiritual enlightenment or emancipation, get used to hearing a few ugly truths. Get used to this and start squaring up for what you're about to see, because we've only just begun the true business of disclosure. It's going to be assaulting our sensibilities and our sensitivities for the next couple of years at least. And it's terrifying. And it's very important that we have the spiritual stamina and the fortitude and the integrity to be able to look this stuff squarely in the eye. In our own country, in our own city, in our own town, it's been going on all around the world. And it's been taking place for hundreds of years. Luciferianism, ritual satanic abuse, human trafficking, gun running, drug running, all of this racketeering has been orchestrated by the church, by the governments over many generations. And the real ugly stories are about to surface. Prepare yourselves, people. If we want to regard ourselves as spiritually refined, really, this is going to be your true test. Brace yourself and do it from a place without judgment, because there are reasons and rationales for these bogeymen, for these specters, for these Babylonian wizards that we're about to face down. But we have to find the strength to look at these stories. So I really wanted to bring that into this conversation, or I would feel we had not done truth and right action any real justice.
Thank you so much, Sacha. And this is a topic so close to my heart. I've worked with ritual abuse. I've worked a lot with sexual abuse. I've seen energetically how, on a massive collective level, the energy of rape and sexual abuse feeds the dark web, the vampiric, construct which has been around us. It's sickening. I'm a huge admirer of the work you've been doing in the last 2 years. I've watched every single video. And I want to say thank you for bringing up to light this incredibly fantastic news that these places are being cracked open and these souls are being released, because one of my biggest pains in the last few years is my deep awareness and consciousness of this, my own personal experiences that I've had to heal as well. And so I'm very deeply connected to this theme, and I just want to honor and thank you for the courage you've had in exposing it, and for really reiterating just how brutally hard it is going to be collectively for us to face it. I agree. I've been on that journey myself. There's more for me to see. There's more for all of us to see. But it's that deep acknowledgement of the shadow and that distortion and that suffering and that torture and that energetic vampirism which has been feeding the web, which has been feeding so much of this construct, which we must absolutely come to terms with. But it is being revealed at the same time as the energy source is being cut off. No more. Those souls will no longer be used and abused in that way. This is over and this is done. And this is such a major cause for celebration. So thank you, Sacha, for bringing this in.
Thank you. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I really appreciate that. And you're right. This is where the real disentanglement from the Atlantean era is happening, and it's happening this week. So this is the perfect conversation at the perfect time to touch on these subjects.
Thank you. Really, really wonderful. I can't believe it. This has made my whole day to hear that this is happening right now. This is amazing. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I was sobbing on the floor like a baby yesterday when I got the third independent corroboration and confirmation that I needed to hear personally, because I'm really caught up in a lot of misinformation, disinformation, being a frontline activist and being very, very well connected. I get a lot of just under siege. I'm under siege at the moment. I'm receiving just so much information. And for me, it's relatively straightforward to divine what is more or less true and what is not. But I have to have at least 2 to 3 first-hand confirmations with people that I know and trust, and have known and trusted for some years, who are in the system. Otherwise, even then, I will withhold and not speak to things. But it's absolutely happening. Besides which, and I think I even mentioned this the other day to you, Valeria, this lightning that's happened, I've known for a couple of weeks since the onset of this global pandemonium. I've been feeling this incredible, deep-seated, vibral upliftment, this bliss wave that is emerging, and I couldn't understand it. I'm thinking, am I a sociopath? Am I the one? Because the whole world is in pain and in agony and in turmoil, and people losing their jobs and losing everything, and I'm actually tapping into a bliss peak wave that I've been waiting for almost half a century. And I recognize now that what I was doing was I was tapping into that psychic knot that is being disentangled as we live and breathe. So yes, let's take that wave and let's surf it with our plasma projection, with all the life force that we can muster.
Such an amazing ride with you guys. I think the more we talk, the more kind of depth reveals itself to us. There's a bigger purpose to this, and we can collectively tap into that. So, you know, everything that you're doing, you know, and all of the light that you're so shamelessly, you know, focusing on that collective shadow that most of us are afraid to talk about. We don't know how to bring up taboo subjects. I'm really glad to see that really deep issues of our society are brought into the light, and we have no other option but to collectively accept the darkness that we have been perpetuating through tax paying, you know. Mm-hmm. For this to, you know, for this collective unfolding to trigger us into that, you know, divinity that is the answer